Welcome to Hypno Jo channel, reading Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love. This is part 3, starting with chapter 16. Depression and loneliness track me down, even after about 10 days in Italy. I'm walking through the Villa Borghese one evening after a happy day spent in school, and the sun is setting gold over St. Peter's Basilica. I'm feeling contented in this romantic scene, even if I'm all by myself, while everyone else in the park is either fondling a lover or playing with a laughing child. But I stop to learn against a balustrade and watch the sunset, and I get to thinking a little too much, and then my thinking turns to brooding, and that's when they catch me up. They come upon me, all silent and menacing like Pinkerton detectives, and they flank me. Depression on my left, loneliness on my right. They don't need to show me their badges. I know these guys very well. We've been playing a cat and mouse game for years now, though I admit that I am surprised to meet them in this elegant Italian garden at dusk. This is no place they belong. I say to them, "How did you find me here? Who told you I had come to Rome?" Depression, always the wise guy, says, "What? You're not happy to see us?" "Go away," I tell him. Loneliness, the more sensitive cop, says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I might have to tell you the whole time you're travelling. It's my assignment." "I'd rather you didn't," I tell him, and he shrugs almost apologetically, but only moves closer. Then they frisk me. They empty my pockets of any joy I had been carrying there. Depression even confiscates my identity. But he always does that. Then loneliness starts interrogating me, which I dread because it always goes on for hours. He's polite but relentless, and he always trips me up eventually. He asks if I have any reason to be happy that I know of. He asks why I'm all by myself tonight. Yet again, he asks, though we've been through this line of questioning hundreds of times already, why I can't keep a relationship going, why I ruined my marriage, why I messed up things with David, why I messed things up with every man I've ever been with. He asks me where I was the night I turned 30 and why things have gone so sour since then. He asks why I can't get my act together and why I'm not at home living in a nice house and raising children like any respectable woman my age should be. He asks why exactly I think I deserve a vacation in Rome when I've made such a rumble of my life. He asks me why I think that running away to Italy like a college kid will make me happy. He asks where I think I'll end up in my old age if I keep living this way. I'll walk back home, hoping to shake them, but they keep following me. These two goons. Depression has a firm hand on my shoulder, and loneliness harangues me with his interrogation. I don't even bother eating dinner. I don't want them watching me. I don't want to let up the stairs to my apartment either. But I know Depression, and he's got a billy club, so there's no stopping him from coming in if he decides that he wants to. It's not fair for you to come here, I tell Depression. I paid you off already. I served my time back in New York. But he just gives me that dark smile, settles into my favourite chair, puts his feet on my table and lights a cigar, filling the place with his awful smoke. Loneliness watches and sighs, then climbs into my bed and pulls the covers over himself, fully dressed, shoes on and all. He's going to make me sleep with him again tonight. I just know it. 17. I'd stopped taking my medication only a few days earlier. It just seemed crazy to be taking antidepressants in Italy. How could I be depressed here? I'd never wanted to be on the medication in the first place. I'd fought taking it for such a long time, mainly because of the long list of personal objections. Americans are over-medicated. We don't know the long-term effects of the stuff yet on the human brain. It's a crime that even American children are on antidepressants these days. We are treating the symptoms and not the causes of a national mental health emergency. Still, during the last few years of my life, there was no question that I was in grave trouble and that this trouble was not lifting quickly. And as my marriage dissolved and my drama with David evolved, I come to have all symptoms of a major depression: loss of sleep, appetite and libido, uncontrollable weeping, chronic backaches and stomach aches, alienation and despair, trouble concentrating on work, inability to even get upset that the Republicans had just stolen a presidential election. It went on and on. When you're lost in those woods, it sometimes takes you a while to realise that you are lost. For the longest time, you can convince yourself that you're just wandering a few feet off the path and that you'll find your way back to the trailhead any moment now. The night falls again and again and you still have no idea where you are, and it's time to admit that you have bewildered yourself so far off the path that you don't even know from which direction the sun rises anymore. I took on my depression like it was the fight of my life, which, of course, it was. I became a student of my own depressed experience, trying to unthread its causes. What was the root of all this despair? Was it psychological? Mum and Dad's fault? Was it temporal? A bad time in my life? When the divorce ends, will the depression end with it? Was it genetic? Melancholy, called by many names, has run through my family for generations. Along with it, a sad bride alcoholism. Was it cultural? Is this just the fallout of a post-feminist American career girl trying to find balance in an increasingly stressful and alienating urban world? Was it astrological? Am I so sad because I am thin-skinned, Cancer whose major signs are ruled by the unstable Gemini? Was it artistic? Don't creative people always suffer from depression because we're so super sensitive and special? Was it evolutionary? Do I carry in me the residual panic that comes after a millennia of my species attempting to survive a brutal world? Was it karmatic? All these spasms of grief, just the consequences of bad behaviour in the previous lifetimes, the last obstacles before the liberation? Was it hormonal, dietary, philosophical, seasonal, environmental? Was I tapping into universal yearning for God? Did I have a chemical imbalance, or did I just need to get laid? Where a large number of factors constitute a single human being, how very many layers we operate on, and how very many influences we receive from our minds, our bodies, our histories, our families, our cities, our souls, our lunches. I came to feel that my depression was probably some overshifting assortment of all these factors, and probably also included some stuff I couldn't name or claim. So I faced the fight at every level. I brought all those embarrassingly titled self-help books, always been certain to wrap up the books in the latest issue of Hustler, so that strangers wouldn't know what I was really reading. I commenced to getting professional help with a therapist who was as kind as she was insightful. I prayed like a novice nun. I stopped eating meat, for a short time anyway, after someone told me that I was eating the fear of the animal that at its moment of death. Some spacey new age massage therapist told me I should wear orange-coloured panties to rebalance my sexual chakras, and brother, I actually did it. I drank enough of that damn St. John's wort tea to cheer up the whole Russian gulag, to no noticeable effect. I exercised, I exposed myself to the uplifting arts and carefully protected myself from sad movies, books and songs. If anyone even mentioned the words Leonard and Cohen in the same sentence, I would leave the room. I tried so hard to fight the endless sobbing. I remember asking myself one night while I was curled up in the same old corner of my same old couch in tears yet again over the same old repetition of sorrowful thoughts. Is there anything about this scene that you can change, Liz? And all I could think to do was stand up, while still sobbing, and try to balance on one foot in the middle of my living room, just to prove that while I couldn't stop the tears or change my dismal interior dialogue, I was not yet totally out of control. At least I could cry hysterically while balanced on one foot. Hey, it was a start. I crossed the street to walk in the sunshine. I leaned on my support network, cherishing my family and cultivating my most enlightening friendships. And when those officious women's magazines kept telling me my low self-esteem wasn't helping depression matters at all, I got myself a pretty haircut, bought some fancy makeup and a nice dress. When a friend complimented my new look, all I could say grimly was, Operation Self-Esteem Day fucking 1. The last thing I tried after about 2 years of fighting this sorrow was medication. If I may impose my opinions here, I think it should always be the last thing you try. For me, the decision to go to the route of vitamin P happened after a night when I'd sat on the floor of my bedroom for many hours, trying very hard to talk myself out of cutting into my arm with a kitchen knife. I won that argument against the knife that night, but barely. I had some other good ideas around that time about jumping off a building or blowing my brains out with a gun might stop the suffering. But something about spending a night with a knife in my hand did it. The next morning I called my friend Susan as the sun came up, begged her to help me. I don't think a woman in the whole history of my family had ever done that before, had ever sat down in the middle of the road like that and said in the middle of her life, I cannot walk another step further, somebody has to help me. It wouldn't have served those women to have stopped walking. Nobody would have or could have helped them. The only thing that would have happened was that they and their families would have starved. I couldn't stop thinking about those women. And I will never forget Susan's face when she rushed into my apartment about an hour after my emergency phone call and saw me in a heap on the couch. The image of my pain mirrored back at me through her visible fear for my life is still one of the scariest memories for me out of all those many scary years. I huddled in a ball while Susan made the phone calls and found me a psychiatrist who would give me a consultation that very day to discuss the possibility of prescribing antidepressants. I listened to Susan's one-sided conversation with the doctor, listened to her say, I'm afraid my friend is going to seriously hurt herself. I was afraid too. When I went to see the psychiatrist that afternoon, he asked me what had taken me so long to get help. As if I hadn't been trying to help myself already for so long. I told my objections and reservations about antidepressants. I laid copies of 3 books I'd already published on his desk and said, I'm a writer. Please don't do anything to harm my brain. He said, if you had a kidney disease, you wouldn't hesitate to take medication for it. Why are you hesitating with this? But see, that only shows how ignorant he was about my family. Gilbert might very well not medicate a kidney disease, seeing that we're a family who regard any sickness as any sign of personal, ethical and moral failure. He put me on a few different drugs, Xanax, Zoloft, Wellbutrin, Buspirone, until we found the combination that didn't make me nauseated or turn my libido into a dim and distant memory quickly. In less than a week, I could feel an extra inch of daylight opening in my mind. Also, I could finally sleep. And this was the real gift, because when you cannot sleep, you cannot get yourself out of the ditch. There's not a chance. The pills give me those recuperative night hours back and also stop my hands from shaking and release the vice grip around my chest and the panic alert button from inside my heart. Still, I'd never relaxed into taking those drugs. Though they helped me immediately, it never mattered who told me these medications were a good idea or perfectly safe. I always felt conflicted about it. Those drugs were part of my bridge to the other side. There's no question about it. But I wanted to be off them as soon as possible, and I'd started taking the medication in January of 2003. By May, I was already diminishing my dosage significantly. Those had been the toughest months anyhow. The last months of the divorce, the last ragged months with David. Could I have endured that time without the drugs? if I'd just held on a little longer? Could I have survived myself by myself? I don't know. That's the thing about human life. There's no control group, no way to ever know how any of us would have turned out if any variables had been changed. I do know those drugs made my misery feel less catastrophic, so I'm grateful for that. But I'm still deeply ambivalent about mood-altering medications. I am awed by their power, but concerned by their prevalence. I think they need to be prescribed and used with much more restraint in this country, and never without parallel treatment of psychological counselling. Medicating the symptom of any illness without exploring its root cause is just classically harebrained Western way to think that anyone could ever get truly better. Those pills might have saved my life, but they did so only in conjunction with about 20 other efforts I was making simultaneous during that period to rescue myself. And I hope to never have to take such a drug again. Through one doctor did suggest that I might have to go on and off antidepressants many times in my life because of my tendency towards melancholy. I hope to God he's wrong. I intend to do everything I can to prove him wrong, or at least to fight that melancholic tendency with every tool in the shed. Whether this makes me self-defeatingly stubborn or self-preservingly stubborn, I cannot say. But there I am. 18. Oh, rather, here I am in Rome, I am in trouble, the goons of depression and loneliness have barged into my life again, and I just took my last Wellbutrin 3 days ago. There are more pills in the bottom drawer, but I don't want them. I want to be free of them forever, but I don't want depression or loneliness around either. I don't know what to do. I am spiralling into panic like I always spiral when I don't know what to do. So what I do for tonight is reach for my post-private notebook, which I keep next to my bed in case I'm ever in emergency trouble. I open it up, I find the first blank page, I write, "I need your help." Then I wait. After a little while, a response comes in my own handwriting. "I am right here. What can I do for you?" And here recommences my strangest and most secret conversations. Here is the most private notebook, is where I talk to myself. I talk to that same voice I met that night in the bathroom floor when I first prayed to God in tears for help, when something or somebody had said, "Go back to bed, Liz." In the years since then, I've found that the voice again in times of code orange distress, and have learned that the best way for me to reach is written conversation, and I've been surprised to find that I can almost always access that voice too, no matter how black my anguish may be, even during my worst of suffering. That calm, compassionate, affectionate and infinitely wise voice, who is maybe me, or maybe not exactly me, is always available for conversation on paper at any time of the day or night. I've decided to let myself off the hook from worrying the conversing with myself on paper means I'm a schizo. Maybe the voice I am reaching for is God, or maybe it's my guru speaking through me, or maybe it's an angel who was assigned to my case, or maybe it's my highest self, or maybe it isn't just indeed a new construct of my subconscious, invented in order to protect me from my own torment. St. Teresa called such divine internal voices locations, words from the supernatural that enter the mind spontaneously, translated into your own language and offering you heavenly consolation. I do know what Freud would have said about such spiritual consolations, of course. They are irrational, deserve no trust. Experience teaches us that the world is no nursery. I agree, the world isn't a nursery. But the very fact that this world is so challenging is exactly why you sometimes must reach out of its jurisdiction for help, appealing to a higher authority in order to find your comfort. At the beginning of my spiritual experiment, I didn't always have such faith in this internal voice of wisdom. I remember once reaching for my private notebook in a bitter fury of rage and sorrow and scrawling the message in my inner voice to the divine interior comfort that took up an entire page of capital letters. I do not fucking believe in you. After a moment, still breathing heavily, I felt a clear pinpoint of light ignite within me. And then I found myself writing this amused and ever calm reply. Who are you talking to then? I haven't doubted its existence again since. So tonight I reach for that voice again. This is the first time I've done this since I came to Italy. What I write in my journal tonight is that I am weak and full of fear. I explain that depression and loneliness have shown up and I am scared that they will never leave. I say that I don't want to take the drugs anymore, but I'm frightened I will have to. I'm terrified I will never really pull my life together. In response, somewhere from within me rises a now familiar presence, offering me all the certainties I've always wished another person would have said to me even when I was troubled. This is what I find myself writing to myself on the page. I am here. I love you. I don't care if you need to stay up crying all night. I will stay with you. If you need the medication again, go ahead, take it. I will love you through that as well. If you don't need the medication, I will love you too. There's nothing you can ever do to lose my love. I will protect you until you die, and after your death I will still protect you. I am stronger than depression, I am braver than loneliness, and nothing will ever exhaust me. Tonight, this strange interior gesture of friendship, the lending of a hand from me to myself when no one else is around to offer solace, reminds me of something that happened to me once in New York City. I walked into the office building one afternoon in a hurry, dashed into the waiting elevator. As I rushed in, I caught up an unexpected glimpse of myself in a security's mirror's reflection. In that moment, my brain did an odd thing. It fired off this split-second message. Hey, you know her, that's a friend of yours. And I actually ran forward towards my own reflection with a smile, ready to welcome that girl whose name I had lost but whose face was so familiar. In a flash instant, of course, I realised my mistake and laughed in embarrassment at almost dog-like confusion over how a mirror works. But for some reason, that incident comes to mind again tonight during my sadness in Rome, and I find myself writing this comforting reminder at the bottom of the page. Never forget that once upon a time, in an unguarded moment, you recognised yourself as a friend. I fall asleep, holding my notebook pressed against my chest, open to this most recent assurance. In the morning, when I wake up, I can still smell a faint trace of depression's lingering smoke, but he himself is nowhere to be seen. Somewhere during the night, he got up and left, and his buddy loneliness beat it too. 19. Here's what's strange though. I haven't seemed to be able to do any yoga since getting to Rome. For years I've had a steady and serious practice, and I even brought my yoga mat with me along with my best intentions. But it just isn't happening here. I mean, when am I going to do my yoga stretches? Before my Italian speedball breakfast of chocolate pastries and double cappuccino, or after? The first few days I was here, I would gamely roll out of my yoga mat every morning, but found I could only look at it and laugh. Once I even said out loud to myself in the character of yoga mat, "Okay, little Miss Pen at quattro formaglie, let's see what you've got today." Abashed, I stashed the yoga mat away in the bottom of my suitcase, never to be unrolled again, it would turn out, until India. Then I went for a walk and ate some pistachio gelato, which Italians consider a perfectly reasonable thing to be eaten at 9:30 a.m, and I frankly could not agree with them more. The culture of Rome just doesn't match the culture of yoga, not as far as I can see. In fact, I've decided that Rome and yoga don't have anything in common at all, except for the way that they both kind of remind you of the word toga. 20. I needed to make some friends, so I got busy with it, and now it is October and I have a nice assortment of them. I know 2 Elizabeths in Rome now besides myself. Both are American, both are writers. The first Elizabeth is a novelist and the second Elizabeth is a food writer, with an apartment in Rome, a house in Umbria and Italian husband, and a job that requires her to travel around Italy eating food and writing about the gourmet. It appears that the second Elizabeth must have saved a lot of orphans from drowning during a previous lifetime. Unsurprisingly, she knows all the best places to eat in Rome, including gelateria that serves frozen rice pudding. And if they don't serve this kind of thing in heaven, then I really don't want to go there. She took me out to lunch the other day, and what we ate included not only lamb and truffles and carpaccio, rolled around hazelnut mousse, but an exotic little serving of pickled lamscapone, which is, as everyone knows, the bulb of the light of the wild hyacinths. Of course, by now I'd also made friends with Giovanni and Dario, my tandem language exchange fantasy twins. Giovanni's sweetness, in my opinion, makes him a national treasure of Italy. He endeared himself to me forever the first night we met, when I was getting frustrated with my inability to find the words I wanted in Italian. And he put his hand on my arm and said, "Liz, you must be very polite with yourself when you are learning something new. Sometimes I feel like he's older than me. What with his Solomon brow and his philosophy degree and his serious political opinions, I'd like to think to try to make him laugh, but Giovanni doesn't always get my jokes. Humour is hard to catch in a second language, especially when you're with a serious young man as Giovanni. He said to me the other night, 'When you are ironic, I'm always behind you. I am slower. It is like you are the lightning and I am the thunder.' And I thought, yeah, baby, and you are the magnet and I am the steel. Bring to me your leather, take me from my lace." But still, he had not kissed me. I don't very often see Dario, the other twin, though. He does spend a lot of time with Sophie. Sophie, my best friend from my language class, and she's definitely somebody you'd want to spend your time with too, if you were with Dario. Sophie is Swedish and in her late 20s and so damn cute, and you could put her on a hook and use her as bait to catch men of all different nationalities and ages. Sophie has just taken a 4-month leave of absence from her good job in a Swedish bank, much to her horror of her family and the bewilderment of her colleagues, only because she wanted to come to Rome and learn how to speak beautiful Italian. Every day after class, Sophie and I got to sit the Tiber, eating our gelato and studying with each other. You can't even rightly call it studying. The thing that we do is more like shared relishing of Italian language, an almost worshipful ritual. And we're always offering each other new, wonderful idioms. Like, for instance, we just learned the other day that unamicia stretta means close friend. But stretta literally means tight, as in clothing, like a tight skirt. So close friend in Italy is one that you can wear tightly, snug against your skin. And that is what my little Swedish friend Sophie is becoming to me. At the beginning, I liked to think that Sophie and I looked like sisters. Then we were taking a taxi through Rome the other day, and the guy driving the cab asked Sophie if Sophie was my daughter. Now, folks, the girl is only about 7 years younger than I am. My mind went into such a spin control mode, trying to explain away what he'd said. For instance, I thought maybe his native Roman cab driver doesn't speak Italian very well and meant to ask if we were sisters. But no, he said daughter, and he meant daughter. Oh, what can I say? I've been through a lot in the last few years. I must look so beat up and old after this divorce. But, as that old country western song out of Texas goes, I've been screwed and sued and tattooed, and I'm still standing here in front of you. I've also become friends with a couple named Maria and Giuliano, introduced to me by my friend Anne, an American painter who lived in Rome a few years back. Maria is from America, Giuliano from the south of Italy. He's a filmmaker. She works for an international agricultural policy organisation. He doesn't speak great English, but he does speak fluent Italian and also fluent French and Chinese, so that's not intimidating. Giulio wants to learn English and asked if he could practice conversing with me in another tandem exchange. In case you're wondering why he wouldn't just study English with his American-born wife, it's because they're married and they fight too much whenever one tries to teach anything to the other one. So Giulio and I met for lunch twice a week to practice our Italian and English, a good task for two people who don't have any history of irritating each other. Giulio and Maria have a beautiful apartment, the most impressive feature of which is, to my mind, the wall that Maria once covered with angry curses against Giulio, scrawled in thick black magic marker, because they were having an argument and he yells louder than me. She wanted to get the words in edgewise. I think Maria is terrifically sexy, and this burst of passionate graffiti is only further evidence of it. Interestingly though, Giulio sees this scrawled upon wall as a sign of Maria's repression because she wrote her curses against him in Italian, and Italian is her second language, a language she has to think about for a moment before she can choose her words. He said if Maria had truly allowed herself to be overcome by anger, which she never does, because she is a good Anglo-Protestant, then she would have written all over that wall in her native English. He says all Americans are like this, repressed, which makes them dangerous and potentially deadly when they do blow up. A savage people, he diagnoses. What I love is that we all had this conversation over a nice relaxed dinner while looking at the wall itself. More wine, honey? Asked Maria. But my newest best friend in Italy is, of course, Luca Spaghetti. Even in Italy, by the way, it's considered a very funny thing to have a last name like Spaghetti. I am grateful for Luca because he has finally allowed me to get even with my friend Brian, who was lucky enough to have grown up next door to a Native American kid named Dennis. Haha. And therefore could always boast that he had the friend with the coolest name. Finally, I can offer competition. Luca also speaks perfect English and is a good eater. In Italian, un buono fossetta. A good fork. So he's terrific company for the hungry likes of me. He often calls in the middle of the day to say, hey, I'm in your neighbourhood, want to meet up for a quick coffee or a plate of oxtail? We spend a lot of time in these dirty little dives in the back streets of Rome. We like the restaurants with the fluorescent lighting and no name listed outside, plastic red checkered tablecloths, homemade lemonade, jello liquor, homemade red wine, pasta served with unbelievable quantities, by which Luca calls little Julius Caesars, proud, pushy locals, guys with hair on the backs of their hands and passionately tending pompadours. I once said to Luca, it seems to me these guys consider themselves Romans first, Italians second, and Europeans third. He corrected me. No, they are Romans first, Romans second, and Romans third. And every one of them is an emperor. Luca is a tax accountant an Italian tax accountant, which means that he is, in his own description, an artist, because there are several hundred tax laws on the books in Italy and all of them contradict each other, so filing a tax return here requires jazz-like improvisation. I think it's funny that he's a tax accountant because he seems like such a stiff work for such a light-hearted guy. On the other hand, Luca thinks it's funny that there's another side to me, this yoga side, that he's never seen. He can't imagine why I would want to go to India and to an ashram of all places when I could just stay in Italy all year, which is obviously where I belong. Whenever he watches me sopping up the leftover gravy from my plate with a hunk of bread and then licking my fingers, he says, "What are you going to eat when you go to India?" Sometimes he calls me Gandhi in the most ironic tone, generally when I'm opening the second bottle of wine. Luca has travelled a fair amount, though he claimed he could never live anywhere but in Rome, near his mother, since he is Italian man. After all, what can he say? But it's not just his mama who keeps him around. He's in his early 30s and has had the same girlfriend since he was a teenager, the lovely Giuliano, whom Luca describes fondly and aptly as acqua e sapone, soap and water, in her sweet innocence. All of his friends are the same friends he's had since childhood, and all from the same neighbourhood. They watch the soccer matches together every Saturday, either at the stadium or in a bar, if in Rome teams are playing away, and they are all returned separately to their homes where they grew up in order to eat the big Sunday afternoon meals cooked by their respective mothers and grandmothers. I wouldn't move from Rome either if I was Luca Spaghetti. Luca has visited America a few times, though, and likes it. He finds New York City fascinating but thinks that the people work too hard there, though he admits they seem to enjoy it, whereas Romans work hard and resent it massively. What Luca Spaghetti doesn't like is an American food, which he says can be described in 2 words: Amtrak pizza. I was with Luca the first time I even tried eating the intestines of a newborn lamb. This is a Roman speciality. Food-wise, Rome is actually a pretty rough town, known for its coarse traditional fare like guts and tongues. All the parts of the animal the rich people up north throw away. My lamb intestines tasted okay as long as I didn't think too much about what they were. They were served in a heavy, buttery, savoury gravy and itself was terrific. But the intestines had a kind of, intestinal consistency. Kind of like liver, but mushier. I did well with them until I started trying to think how I would describe this dish. And I thought, it doesn't look like intestines, but it actually looks like tapeworms. Then I pushed it aside and asked for a salad. "You don't like it?" asked Luca, who loves the stuff. "I bet Gandhi never ate lamb intestines in his whole life," I said. "He could have." "No, he couldn't have, Luca. Gandhi was a vegetarian." "But vegetarians can eat this," Luca insisted, "because intestines aren't even meatless. They're just shit." 21. Sometimes I wonder what I'm doing here. I admit it, while I have come to Italy in order to experience pleasure, during the first few weeks I was here, I felt a bit of a panic as to how one should do that. Frankly, pure pleasure is not my cultural paradigm. I come from a long line of super conscientious people. My mother's family were Swedish immigrant farmers who look in their photographs like if they'd ever seen something pleasurable they might have stomped on it with their hobnailed boots. My uncle calls the whole lot of them oxen. My father's side of the family were English Puritans, those great goofy lovers of fun. If I look on my dad's family tree, all the way back to the 17th century, I can actually find Puritan relatives with names like Diligence and Meekness. My own parents have a small farm and my sister and I grew up working. We were taught to be dependable, responsible, the top of our classes at school, the most organised and efficient babysitters in town. The very miniature models of our hard-working farmer, nurse of a mother, a pair of junior Swiss Army knives, born to multitask. We had a lot of enjoyment in my family and a lot of laughter, but their walls were papered with to-do lists, and I never experienced or witnessed idleness, not once in my whole entire life. Generally speaking, though, Americans have an inability to relax into sheer pleasure. Ours is an entertainment-seeking nation, but not necessarily a pleasure-seeking one. Americans spend billions to keep themselves amused with everything from porn to theme parks to wars. But that's not exactly the same thing as quiet enjoyment. Americans work harder and longer and more stressful hours than anyone else in the world today, but Luca Spaghetti pointed out that we seem to like it. Alarmingly, statistics back this observation up, showing that many Americans feel more happy and fulfilled in their offices than they do in their homes. Of course, we all inevitably work too hard. Then we get burned out and have to spend the whole weekend in our pyjamas eating cereal straight out of the box and staring at the TV in a mild coma, which is the opposite of working, yes, but not exactly the same thing as pleasure. Americans don't really know how to do nothing. This is because of that great sad American stereotype. The overstressed executive who goes on vacation but who cannot relax. I once asked Luca Spaghetti if Italians on vacation have that same problem. He laughed so hard that he almost drove his motorbike into a fountain. "Oh no," he said, "we are the masters of bel far niente." This is a sweet expression. Bel far niente means the beauty of doing nothing. Now listen, Italians have traditionally always been hard workers, especially those long-suffering labourers known as bracciante, also called because they had nothing but the brute strength in their arms, bracci, to help them survive in this world. But even against that backdrop of hard work, bel far niente was always been a cherished Italian ideal. The beauty of doing nothing is a goal of all your work, the final accomplishment for which you are most highly congratulated. The more exquisitely and delightfully that you can do nothing, the higher your life's achievement. You don't necessarily need to be rich in order to experience this either. There's another wonderful Italian expression, l'arte di arrangiarsi, the art of making something out of nothing, the art of turning a few simple ingredients into a feast, or a few gathered friends into a festival. Anyone with a talent for happiness can do this, not only the rich. For me, though, a major obstacle in my pursuit of pleasure was my ingrained sense of Puritan guilt. Do I really deserve this pleasure? This is a very American too. The insecurity about whether we have earned our happiness. Planet advertising in America orbits completely around the need to convince the uncertain consumer that yes, you have actually warranted a special treat. This bud's for you. You deserve a break today because you're worth it. You've come a long way, baby. And the insecure consumer thinks, yeah, thanks, I'm going to buy a 6-pack, damn it, maybe even 2 6-packs. And then comes the retractory binge, followed by the remorse, such as advertising campaigns will probably not be as effective in Italian culture, where people already know that they are entitled to enjoyment in this life. They reply in Italy to, you deserve a break today. You probably be, yeah, no duh. That's why I'm planning on taking a break at noon to go over your house and sleep with your wife. Which is probably why, when I told my Italian friends that I'd come to their country in order to experience 4 months of pure pleasure, they didn't have any hang-ups about it. Complimenti, vanti, congratulations, they would say. Go ahead, knock yourself out, be our guest. No one once said, how completely irresponsible of you, or what self-indulgent luxury. But while the Italians had given me full permission to enjoy myself, I still can't let go. During my first few weeks in Italy, all my Protestant synapses were zinging into distress, looking for a task. I wanted to take on pleasure like a homework assignment or a giant science fair project, or I pondered such questions as, How is pleasure more effectively maximised? I wondered if maybe I should spend all my time in Italy in the library doing research on history of pleasure. Or maybe I should just interview Italians who've experienced a lot of pleasure in their lives, asking them what their pleasure feels like, and then writing a report on this very topic, double-spaced and with 1-inch margins perhaps, to be returned in the first thing Monday morning. When I realised that the only question at hand was, how do I define pleasure? And that I was truly in a country where people would permit me to explore the question freely. Everything changed. Everything became delicious. All I had to do was ask myself every day for the first time in my life, what would you enjoy doing today, Liz? What would bring you pleasure right now? With nobody else's agenda to consider and no other obligations to worry about, this question finally became distilled and absolutely self-specific. It was interesting for me to discover that I did not want to do in Italy once. I'd given myself executive authorization to enjoy my experience there. There are so many manifestations of pleasure in Italy, and I didn't have time to example them all. You have to kind of declare a pleasure major here, and you get overwhelmed. That being the case, I didn't get into fashion or opera or cinema or fancy automobiles or skiing or the Alps. I didn't even want to look at that much art. I'm a bit ashamed to admit this, but I did not want to visit a single museum during my entire 4 months of Italy. Oh, man, it's even worse than that. I have to confess that I did go to one museum, the National Museum of Pasta in Rome. I found that all I really wanted was to eat beautiful food and to speak much beautiful Italian as possible. That was it. So I cleared a double major, really, in speaking and eating, with a concentration on gelato. The amount of pleasure this eating and speaking brought me was inestimable, and yet so simple. I passed a few hours once in the middle of October that might look like nothing much to the outside observer, but which I will always count amongst the happiest of my life. I found a market near my apartment, only a few streets over from me, which I somehow never noticed before. There I approached a tiny vegetable stall with one Italian woman and her son selling a choice of assortment of their produce, such as rich, almost algae green leaves of spinach, tomatoes so red and bloody that they looked like a cow's organs, and champagne-coloured grapes, with skins as tight as a showgirl's leotard. I selected a bunch of thin, bright asparagus. I was able to ask the woman in a comfortable Italian if I could possibly just take half of this asparagus home. There was only one of me, I explained to her, and didn't need much. She promptly took the asparagus from my hands and halved it. Then I asked her if I could find this market every day in the same place, and she said yes. She was here every day from 7 a.m. Then her son, who was very cute, gave me a sly look and said, well, she tries to be here at 7. We all laughed. This whole conversation was conducted in Italian, a language I could not speak a word of only a few months earlier. I walked home to my apartment and the soft-boiled a pair of fresh brown eggs for my lunch. I peeled the eggs and arranged them on a plate beside the 7 stalks of asparagus, which were so slim and snappy they didn't need to be cooked at all. I put some olives on the plate too, and 4 knobs of goat cheese I'd picked up yesterday from the formagheteria down the street, and the 2 slices of pink oily salmon for dessert. A just lovely peach, which the woman at the market had given me for free, and which I was still warm from the Roman sunlight. For the longest time, I couldn't even touch this food because it was such a masterpiece of lunch, a true expression of the art of making something out of nothing. Finally, when I had fully absorbed the prettiness of my meal, I went and sat in a patch of sunbeam on the clean wooden floor and ate every bite of it with my fingers while reading my daily newspaper article in Italian. Happiness inhabited my every molecule until, as often happened during those first few months of travel, whenever I'd feel such happiness, my guilt alarm went off. I heard my ex-husband's voice speaking disdainfully in my ear. So this is what you gave up everything for? This is what you gutted our entire life together for a few stalks of asparagus in an Italian newspaper? And I replied out loud to him, first of all, I said, I am very sorry, but this isn't your business anymore. And secondly, to your question, yes. 22.